Hey there, in this video, I'm going to show you 3 things I do to cut my fabrics so I get the very most use out of my favorite prints. So first things first, whenever I get new yardage, I'm always super excited for new yardage, but before I do any sort of cutting, I will remove the selvage. So the selvage is this really pretty part at the top. It's the fuzzy part up here. And this part isn't typically used for quilting projects. So usually you don't use it, right? But I like to use them for selvage projects. And I love selvage projects because they are so pretty. I love the combination of text, color, and pattern, and of course, the little fuzzy texture at the top. So here's how I save my selvages. Well, I most commonly see selvage projects with just this white part, but I like to also include some of the fabric in my selvage projects because it's pretty, right? We love this pretty fabric. And so what I do is and I'll tell you, so you can be very generous with your cuts because most patterns call for a minimum of 20 inches width of fabric. So from the fold to where my left finger is, that is 20 inches. So you can take this much fabric off. So typically when I am just eyeballing my selvages in my new fabric, I will take anywhere between 2 inches and 1.5 inches. So just to be on the safe side, I'm going to do 1.5 inches here. Now I have this pretty selvage. I will save these selvages, right? I'll save them in a pretty jar on my desk. And then once I get enough, I will turn it into fabric and then a selvage quilt. All right, so now that the selvage is off, then I am ready to cut for my actual project that I'm working on. So typically when I am cutting from yardage, I like to save one side for cutting my strips and then one side for cutting any funky angled pieces. Here's an example of a piece of fabric that I've already cut up. So here on the right side, you can see I've taken some weird chunks out of it. So I'll do my weird chunks on one side and my strips on another side. That way I don't have to clean up both sides to get a nice clean side for my strips. And to show you an example of a fat quarter, here's what it looks like for a fat quarter. So this is a fat quarter. One side is for weird chunks. The other side is for strips. So by saving that one side for weird chunks, you have one clean side for strips, so you don't have to do any cleaning and waste this fabric. And then for example, if I were to cut fabric for this triangle, this calls for strips. So here's how I would do it. So first things first, I'm going to clean up. This hasn't been cut yet, so I just want to make sure it's straight. It's pretty straight, but I'd like it to be straighter. So I'm a right-hand quilter. So I am going to line up my fabric with the folds going to be lined up on one of my lines, horizontal lines on my cutting mat. And then the right side is just going to extend past this vertical line here so I can give it a clean cut. I'm going to line up my ruler with this vertical line here. So it's lined up here at the bottom and it's lined up here at the top. And then I like to flip it back over and line it up again. And then I like to use the lines on my ruler. So for this triangle and this size, I am going to cut fabric strips 2 inches and 1/4. So I'm going to find the 2 inch and 1/4 line on my ruler and zooming in so you can see at 2 inches and 1. So 1 inch, 2 inch, 1/4. And I make sure it's lined up all throughout. And so that's my strip there. And then cutting weird shapes. So this triangle, you can see it's got some weird shapes. So I would cut from the other side. And then here's one of the cutting templates from this triangle here. And what I do is I will cut from the top of the fabric. So the part where it's not folded, I will cut from both layers. So even if it's a fat quarter, like our fat quarter earlier, I would cut from a doubled up layer here. So you've got fabric wrong sides together, and you would cut from both sides here. So what I do is I will line up my cutting template and I will use my fabric scissors and I will cut out using that template. And you can get as tight as you want If you are a newer quilter, I would give yourself some extra wiggle room just in case. It's a little bit more forgiving to have extra fabric than to have just enough. So I will keep on going down until I get my fold, till I hit my fold rather. So that's how I would cut out some weird shapes from my yardage. So there's a little bit more that goes into cutting out funky angled pieces, but if you just remember, whether you're cutting from yardage or if you're cutting from a fat quarter, if you just cut from a doubled up piece with wrong sides together, that is a really good rule of thumb for beginning quilt makers and advanced quilt makers. So that's it. That is how I cut my fabric. That is how I get the most out of every single little bit of my favorite fabric. So first I take the selvage off, and then from one side I cut my strips, and I save that one side for strips, and then I save the other side for funky shapes, just like that. Happy quilting!